Hi everyone. About a week ago I put out a video that said this is going to look like a 9/11 like recession, and within days I realized I was quite a bit off. Things are a lot worse. So this is a very gloomy presentation, but I picked this beautiful theme with flowers to brighten everyone's mood. Here's what's going on. I think we've got four simultaneous crises going on at the same time. We've got a health crisis that's really triggered these others, but these others are somewhat independent. We've got a financial crisis, an energy crisis, and then a broader economic crisis. So I'm going to break it down by each. First, with the health crisis. One of the things that I thought a week ago that I don't think today is that this isn't that big of a deal for young people. And it turns out that it is. 20% of hospitalizations are of young people, people under the age of 44. I now have a few anecdotal experiences through friends. This thing is no joke. It's a serious illness. CDC says from 0.25% to 3% fatality rate as of a report they put out just a couple days ago. So I just ran some numbers. If this is just U.S. population, so 40, 50%, 60% infection rate of total population, and then you can run through the fatalities, and you can see kind of the middle of the road is like somewhere between 1.6 and 3 million fatalities. This is a serious number. Organically, every year in the U.S. we have about 3 million people die per year. So we would drop life expectancy by an entire year, which I think would be the greatest decrease ever of life expectancy in the U.S. For comparison, about 58,000 young people died in the Vietnam War on the American side, and then just under 3,000 during 9/11. So we're looking at massive, massive fatalities. We can reduce the impact. Everybody's seen the flatten the curve. We got to go into isolation. But then the question is, how long do we have to go into isolation? If we go into isolation for 3 months, according to this study, which had some Canadian professors and I think it was funded by Globe and Mail, we're not really doing anything. You got to be isolated for a good 6 months for us to really make an impact. So that means we're going to be holed up for a long time in order to prevent all those fatalities from happening. All right, that's the health crisis. Energy crisis, completely independent of everything else. Oil prices have plummeted. Saudis are fighting the Russians, and I think they're all fighting the American drillers. Oil prices, as of Friday close, we're at $22 a barrel. Haven't been this low since 2001, since 9/11 actually. Let's talk about the economic impact of that. Around the time of 9/11, we produced 5.8 million barrels a day in the U.S. Today we produce over 12 million barrels a day. We ended 2019 with $41 barrel oil. Today it's at $22, so we've got this delta of $18. That's $230 million a day of revenue, $6.9 billion a month of revenue, and it's really going primarily to 5 states. So Texas, North Dakota, New Mexico. By the way, I didn't know New Mexico produces so much oil, but produces more oil than Oklahoma and Colorado. I know that in Colorado, it's a major industry. I live here. I have a lot of friends that work in the oil industry, a lot of entrepreneurial activity, a lot of everything Colorado-centric is based in oil. Now, a lot of people might think, what's the big deal? I mean, there's producers, there's consumers, and this is going to affect a small number of people, but really benefit a larger number of people. And there is some truth to that. This is kind of zero sum, right? So what the producers give up, the consumers gain. But it's a real shock. And I want to hold it analogous to restaurants. Right now, all of our friends in the restaurant industry are really suffering. the restaurant industry brings, in Colorado, just Colorado alone, about $1 billion a month of total revenue. So that's across, that's total economic activity, basically. In Colorado alone, we've got $843 million of oil revenue that's being lost. Just being lost. So imagine the impact that suddenly closing all the restaurants is having. We've got almost an equal impact from revenue loss to the oil producers. And I use the restaurant example because Americans aren't consuming fewer calories, right? This is just a net trade-off. Well, I'm spending less money in restaurants, I'm spending more money in groceries, but I'm pretty much eating the same amount of food. But the restaurant industry is really hurting, and so is the oil industry. This is a real shock to the system. And it's got second-order impacts because the oil industry is heavily leveraged. We've got $40 billion in debt that's going to mature this year, and then I think it's $44 billion in debt, or $45 billion in debt that's supposed to mature next year for oil. BOK Bank, about 20% of its book is in oil, and their stock has gone down from about $88 to $37 since the start of the year. So this is the energy crisis isn't just impacting energy workers and the oil economy, it's going to have a cascading effect to the financial sector. We do have a financial crisis that seems to be somewhat independent of what's going on everywhere else. The S&P is down 29% year to date, but so is just about everything else. Everything except treasuries is down. Now, I got a finance degree, and my finance professors told me that when stocks are down, bonds are up. Pretty much everything's down. Everything aside from U.S. treasuries is down. Gold is down. We've got something that's going on, and I think that something is an unwind of corporate debt. So corporate debt, super high as a proportion of GDP, and I think all around at unprecedented levels. And we know why. It's because interest rates have been so low for so long that it was just such a cheap source of capital. Why not? So I think we saw companies levering up just to buy back stock. And I think everybody understood that doesn't feel right, but debt's so cheap. Why wouldn't you do that? Your cost of capital with the debt is so much lower than it is with equity, so you might as well. So I think this is where modern finance is kind of like a head scratcher, right? It intuitively feels wrong, but modern finance tells us it's right. And here we are. Now, I'm not so familiar with this part of the economy, but I know that it's critical to the inner workings of the financial system. Credit default swaps, repos, which is where banks lend each other money overnight, or that repo market is under duress, and the Fed is stepping in a big way. The Fed also opened up this facility called PDCF, which they haven't done since 2008, or at least it was created in 2008 as part of the financial crisis. If you look at the term sheet for PDCF, there's a couple of alarming things. I underlined them. The Fed will lend to banks against commercial paper and equities. That means banks can buy equities from individuals, from anybody. They can buy junk bonds. They can buy any commercial paper, and then they can borrow against it from the Fed for virtually nothing. So the Fed will hold on to that collateral for up to 90 days, but it seems like this is almost an indefinite promise. I'm not quite understanding of how it works, but this seems alarming to me. So we've got this financial crisis, and then these are all triggering into this economic crisis. Goldman says we're going to see GDP drop 24%. We've got unemployment claims that are going to be released next Thursday. And people are speculating that the number is going to be 2 million. Now, Bank of America yesterday said they think it's going to be 3 million. Never in the history of America will we have had such a large, immediate jump in unemployment claims, because all these people are out of work. Energy people are out of work. The service sector is out of work. I think the financial sector is about to basically lay off a lot of people because so many things are unraveling. And then Congress is working on a multi-trillion-dollar package to rescue the American economy, which is great, right? So everybody wants a rescue from the government. I don't really understand how that's going to work for our debt. CBO projected 3.6 trillion in revenue this year. That's obviously not going to happen. If there's zero corporate income and household income plummets, I don't know, what is that? Maybe that's going to be 2 trillion in revenue instead of 3.6. And if Congress does a $2 trillion injection, that means our outlays will be 6.7 against 2 trillion in revenue, $4.7 trillion deficit in 1 year. We're going to increase our national debt by like 30% by 1 year. What are the third order impacts there? I don't even know. I think that's the strongest reason to hold crypto, because our money's not going to be sound. But there's good news. Good news for investors is that there's going to be a massive amount of distress deals. This is a journalist post from 2019. Carl Icahn saying he's buying distressed paper. It was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Looks like it's going to be more than once in a lifetime. Maybe we're overusing that. Oh, no, he said once in a generation. Okay, maybe. What is that, like 3 or 4 times in a lifetime? Okay, so maybe legit. We're going to see a tremendous amount of bank-owned equity, bank-owned companies, basically, that investors are going to be able to buy up for cheap. And this is going to continue to accelerate all sorts of internet technologies. Zoom is one of the few stocks that's up year to date, but it's up in a big way. This is going to force the economy to be more productive. And the number one tool we have for more productivity is software. So, surprise, surprise, that's the business I'm in. But I truly believe in that. Software is going to eat the world. And get on board, because if you don't, it's going to take your job. It's going to take your company. Software is critical to the development of our economy. Lots of bad news, I know. I think if you've got dry powder, you're in a good spot. You can be in a good spot. It's going to take some courage. We're going to have to do some deals that look like we're catching a knife, but they're going to pay off. Now's the time to step up and make some big investments. Thanks, everyone.